Hey Eric, how are you?
Oh, not bad. I'm
Good.
here with Simon West, director of Old Guy. I guess the first start because you've done a bunch of stuff. Um, when script comes to you, what's the things that go through your head that make you decide, oh, I'm going to do this. This seems cool, or this one's not for me. I'm going to pass on this one.
Well, there's a couple of things that one is like, do I like reading it? Can I get past the first, 10 pages? That's always a good sign. If it's right, if, do you fall asleep when you're reading it? How many times do you fall asleep? Um, Bad sign. But if you just keep wanting to turn the page, you go, well, I really like this, the people in this, I like what they're saying, and I like the world. Um, and if it comes down to the world, you go like, do I want to spend a year and a half making this film? Because you have to love it enough to, be with it every day for that length of time. And if it's a comedy, will the jokes still be funny in 9 months' time? Will you still be excited by the action? So it has to go through a lot of hoops really before it gets through to yes, I will do it. And Old Guy was one of those that I read very quickly, could see what I wanted to do with it. Knew that I had a great central character. If you've got a great central character, you're most of the way there. He was someone that people would want to spend time with. He was funny. He was vulnerable. He was kind of eccentric as well. And it was an unusual combination. An old guy, who was a contract killer, a hitman, but really just wanted to have a good time and go out and party like he did when he was in his 20s. And that's a very attractive character to spend time with. So then, you've got to find who to play that. And I always like getting a very serious actor and putting them in a more, light world in a way. And I thought Christoph Waltz hasn't done anything like this. So when I approached him, and luckily he loved it because I think he also had, felt like, oh, I haven't been seen doing this sort of thing. I'd love to do it and make people realize I can do humor and I can look vulnerable and I can do action. And so he jumped on board. And once he was on board, then it was, the rest just fell into place because, Lucy Liu really wanted to work with Christoph and she was perfect for the part. And then Cooper was like the new, fresh thing on the block and he'd done one film, but I think, he's got great things in store. And so I thought that combination is going to work. So, at that stage, you're going, right, I'm in, I'm committed. I will spend a year doing this.
You mentioned the jokes that stay funny over time, but jokes don't
Mm-hmm.
usually do that. When you're making a movie, obviously you got to know that the things are going to lose its luster. How can you how do I put this? How do you know to keep it in? It's like we don't think it's funny now, but we know it's funny because it was the first 500 times. It's just kind of lost in now.
Yeah, I mean, certainly funny enough, some things do just make you laugh every time you see it. Others, you just, yeah, like you say, you bank it. You go like, well, I knew that was funny, for 6 months, so I think it still is funny. But the real way of telling is putting it in front of an audience, playing it to a real audience who've never seen it before. And not only that, they find things funny that you didn't at all. That's always the most surprising thing, and the most fun thing is they'll spot something that you thought was just ordinary, and they think that's the best bit in the film, and the funniest bit. Sometimes, the things you thought funny that fall flat, but it's very quick research, when it's a silent room, that didn't work at all. So tracking, but really illuminating to play it in front of an audience for a test. And that's the only way to tell really, because you have been, watching the same jokes for a year.
Do you have any surprises in that regard? Like when you were doing a test screening, it was like, oh, hey, didn't know we
Yeah,
had something there.
yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of times, like to write down what's their favorite scene in a film. And when I tested Con Air, it was when Nick Cage slapped the convict on the face who was in the dress. He goes to, he thinks he's going to punch him and decides to slap her. And the audience thought that was the funniest thing in the film. And we never even considered that part of the, the jokes in it. And in General's Daughter, when we tested it, we had a happy ending, and the audience hated it because the happy ending was based on the original book, but the scene before the end was a sort of a funeral scene, and they wanted to stay sad. Basically, they wanted to stay in the moment, and so I cut off the happy ending, and the tests went through the roof. So it's surprising when you show it to an audience.
Yeah. And also, I didn't know this about you, but you were the first person to Rickroll anyone, which I thought was pretty neat. What had,
Well, I
oh,
wasn't actually Rick rolling something that somebody else invented, and I made a video whenever it was 30 or 40, I don't know, yeah, a long time ago when I was like 20 or something, and thought that was disappeared, and then 20 years later, someone decides it's a great idea to invent this thing Rick rolling, and then somebody does it to me, and I go, wait a minute, I got Rick rolled. But yeah, I didn't invent it. I wouldn't. I wouldn't have invented that. But it is. I do see the joke because it's just a bizarre, surreal thing to happen when you don't make a music video decades ago that you never think you're going to see again, and suddenly it becomes the most viewed video on YouTube ever or something. You go, damn, that's weird.
that the good thing or bad? I suppose it have to be a good thing because I mean it's kind of part of your legacy now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's something out of my control, and I think it's a weird thing. I don't think
Oh,
it's good or bad. I mean, it's like it's fun. It's a fun thing. So it's not going to hurt the world. It makes the world a funnier place. So I'm going to go along with it.
you
And one I worked on the film. I worked on that video one day years ago, and it's come back. Year after year after year. But
like, oh man, I should have just stayed home.
yeah.
But
I don't know.
but so I like to ask people to give movie recommendations, and these would be recommendations like this movie's really good and no one ever talks about it. I wish more people would see this. What's a movie you would like to recommend to other people?
Oh well, these I find hard to see. Like there's films I loved in the past that I really try and find copies of, and things like one's called a French movie called Moon in the Gutter, that it's very hard to find a copy of. But in America, I guess the film I try to recommend people is With Nail and I, that a lot of English people's favorite filmmakers particularly, but in the States it's not so well known. So I would recommend people to see With Nail and I. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And last question, because you got a pretty lengthy career. What's like obviously people know of like Con Air, General's Daughter, all stuff like that, but like what's something you worked on or it's like maybe you're particularly proud of, or it's like this should have kicked off more and I wish it did. I'm really proud of this. Like what's some of your filmography that someone can go back to?
Um, most of them are quite well known, I suppose. There's not a lot. I haven't done a lot of small films that no one's seen, I suppose. But I do like, there's a film I did with Nick Cage called Stolen, and I think that's a film I really enjoyed making with Nick again after Con Air, and also I liked the way it was made. So a good one. I still think The General's Daughter is the favorite film of mine because I just like the way that film was made. We had a lot of time to make it right, and it's well crafted and it's very filmic. And I still like The General's Daughter, which did very well. In fact, it did better in the States than Con Air, but around the rest of the world, people don't really know it. It's mainly a US release. So if you're outside the US, I'd say look at General's Daughter because that's my favorite film.
All right. Well, Simon, thanks for joining me. And Old Guy is out in theaters and on digital February 21st. And yeah, it was a really fun movie. Congratulations.
Thanks, Eric. Nice to meet you.
Yep. Likewise.